So can I transition to this other question?
Sure, please.
I had
Please get us out of this.
like if I keep talking about this, are you going to cancel me? Or are you going to cut me off?
We've already
my
been
question,
canceled.
Oh.
Welcome back to Reason Together, the podcast for Christians who think about stuff. I'm Thomas, here with Daniel, as always. How are you this morning?
Good. I'm doing pretty well. Thank you.
We're glad that you joined us today. We first want to start off by thanking our patrons over at patreon.com/reasontogether. Those are the generous folks who have decided to finance this podcast, to put money behind it and put their support behind it in that way, and we are certainly grateful for that. If you would like to join up as a patron, you can go to patreon.com/reasontogether and sign up for one of our member levels there. There's a few perks involved with that, and you can check that out. Patreon.com/reasontogether.
All right. Well, our last episode, it's interesting as we record. I think what I remember about last episode is it seemed like it was all over.
Yeah.
I mean, like we were just here and there, and it was just kind of a really wide variety of of conversation topics. And then, but then you like edit it and you come out with a title, and I was like, whoa, that was like cohesive. I mean, as far as you said, final this, final that, final that. I was like, that was neat.
There was a common thread. We talked
Yes.
about the end of the year. We talked about the potential end of the Republic. And we talked about the end of life. So,
Wow.
yeah, maybe it was a morbid-sounding title. I don't know, but it was. It's certainly an attention getter, you know.
So like the end of all things is at hand. Go ahead and listen to this episode because it'll be the last thing you ever hear. Or I don't.
Yeah.
But I've got some questions for you personally, probably after we record today, because for those our listeners. Tom, I think, has more so found his organizational niche than I have. I mean, as far as what works for him, maybe I'm wrong, but
Okay.
you're a to-doist, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not, and I'm trying out a couple different things, and have been sort of working on that here for a while, and so I want to pick your brain after we're finished on some organization of
Sure.
material there. So, but if you're in the organizational realm, we'll be glad to hear what apps and what system you use to track your tasks and your projects.
Have we ever talked about that on the podcast?
No, not yet. Well, not recently.
Okay. Yeah. We might have
sometime
to,
we'll have to do
maybe
that.
have a follow-up to that or something.
Yeah, that sounds
point.
good. We've got, as I was looking at our list of questions today, well, actually, we've got some feedback on our hymn episode. We talked here a few episodes back about hymns that we liked or ones that we didn't care for. And one of our listeners, Daniel, says, a great episode. Hymns are so amazing. That is true, Daniel. I agree. I have found that the way hymns express truth is especially encouraging and comforting when going through difficult trials in life. One of my favorites is "And Can It Be?" Yes, especially the full hymn as found in Living Hymns. That's the hymnal that we use here. My least favorite and one that I find annoying is "In the Garden."
Yes.
Uh-oh, now watch out, bud.
Yes.
I actually brought that one out recently in a Sunday school lesson. I was going through different hymns, demonstrating the hymn writers' awareness of their need for God. And so, of course, I love hymns too, and I was able to go through different texts, some maybe not as well known. But "In the Garden" is interesting, and what I pointed out to them, because that is definitely an old favorite that's just, meaningful, at least in our congregation, to people. That's just something that means something to them. But what I pointed out was what story was he actually alluding to, and what actually connected with the story and what didn't. And it's interesting because if you think, okay, who's he talking about? I come to the garden alone while the dew is still in the roses, and the voice I hear, the Son of God is closest. Okay, what garden was he talking about? who is he talking about? Well, there actually is a biblical garden. I think he's referencing there in a particular personage. But then when he says, and he walks with me and he talks with me and he tells me I am his own, that's not true of the biblical story. So I was just pointing out, well, that's true of us, that we have that pleasure, but it doesn't fit the story that was referenced. Anyway, it's just an interesting song.
Deep.
More emotional, but anyway, so thank you, Daniel.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel.
Yep. And our elite patron, right? Am I remembering?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Thank you for your support and your feedback.
We know this Daniel. This is the Daniel that won the mug that one time.
Yay.
Did the mug giveaway.
Yes.
Yeah.
And a real quick feedback on our games, or we referenced at some point games, and I couldn't find it last episode. I was trying to find this feedback, and I found it. But one of our listeners, Dave, recommended a game, Hoopla. I have not played Hoopla, but anyway, that was recommended. He gave me a link to it.
What is that word? Hoopla.
Hoopla. When did that enter the English language?
Who comes up with these things?
The English language, for being so difficult and sometimes sort of ridiculous, is fun because America, as a melting pot of nations, I think has drawn, phrases from. I suppose that's the reason. I think they probably have a heritage of phrases from all over the world or from different cultures, and so there's so many colloquialisms that we go, well, what does that mean? Well, what did that actually mean? Where did that come from? And there's so many of them. I first probably was made aware of it years ago when I was talking on the phone with a former foreign exchange student of ours from Japan. And I was trying to talk to him, and you might say something like, yeah, he went the whole 9 yards and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, wait, no, he didn't. Okay, he didn't get that, or he's wondering what I'm saying. And so you start to realize how much in your speech you're using terms that don't really mean what they mean. You have to kind of be in the know. And there's so many of those. They're actually kind of fun, those idioms that we have.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's a side topic there. But
it's a lot of hoopla is what that is. Anyway,
thank you.
Where are we going? Where are we going with all of this?
Nowhere. I think that was the bridge to nowhere.
Right.
So, but we have a couple interesting questions today as we dive in. One is, I think, from you. The other is from me.
Okay.
But why don't you give us that question about presently separated Christians?
Yes. This one, I was listening to a Christian, I guess, commentator, you'd call him. I'm not sure what exactly it is he does. I guess he has a radio show or what have you.
Christian talker.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he was discussing the matter of potential persecution with the incoming Biden administration, and which is today, by the way. We're recording this on Wednesday, Inauguration Day. Obviously, I don't think anybody expects full-blown persecution right now. I don't know, maybe some do. Maybe some are really freaked out. But I don't know that that's really on the table immediately. But it's interesting that it is in the back of people's minds with this administration. And as a potential thing, which should say something about the incoming administration. But the idea that Christians right now, in a time of relative peace and such, we often, this is the point the commentator is trying to make. It's a luxury that we have, that we now disagree on things, and thus, as a result, don't have close fellowship sometimes. And that's often used as a slur against Christians who separate, like ourselves. We certainly do think that separation is important on matters. And again, just to be clear, we're not talking about being rude to people. We're talking about just a certain degree of distance in fellowship. If someone's not really living in accordance with what the Scriptures teach, we don't want to either give credence to what they say or to learn their habits. So we kind of keep a friendly distance from some folks. That's personal separation. Then, of course, there's ecclesiastical separation, in which your church does not cooperate with other ministries that do not hold to scriptural views. That's important as well. So that kind of sets the table for what we're talking about here. Is this commentator was saying we enjoy that as a luxury right now, but he said the illustration went like this: that if we were shackled together in something like a Philippian jail, right, under the Biden administration, right, and we're shackled together with, I don't know, a Calvinist or someone who doesn't use the right text and such. If we're shackled together with them under persecution, this commentator was implying that suddenly those issues that we always separated about won't really be as important then. That then we'll be kind of on the same page. We'll be of one mind in a sense there, is what he's saying, because those things will kind of melt away. And right now we're both just Christians. And this obviously seems extreme to me. It's almost in a sense suggesting that the matters that we separate over now are not important. But is it implying that fully, or is it just implying that there's a mitigating issue under persecution? What are your thoughts?
It's interesting. I mean, what I would draw from it is a little bit of both of what you're talking about there, is that, and it's sort of that old discussion of essentials and non-essentials. Mm-hmm. It's there's something so big that we can all agree on it, regardless of the little things. And apparently, in that illustration, it's the thing that's so big is that we are Christians.
Yeah.
Which, if we're technical about that, that means that we've believed the gospel. The fault of that illustration is that we can say, well, we are both Christians. It's like stripping us down to only the gospel in times of dire straits like that. Mm-hmm. That, well, we at least agree on the gospel, so we can what? Yeah. I mean, so we're shackled together in a Philippian jail. What do you think? I wouldn't usually talk to you, or I couldn't sing with you.
Well, I think it's like the idea of gravitating towards someone. So, I mean, let me change the scenario a little bit. Instead of being shackled together with someone like that, you're in some sort of unified pen, as it were, where there's dozens of people, and you're under persecution, the likes of which America has never seen, and such. And you're in there, and you kind of know that all the people that are in there with you, they're not of like mind with you. They're not Christians. In fact, they maybe some of them also really don't like everything about Christianity. They just have called themselves a Christian their whole life. They're maybe cultural Christians. So maybe they identified with Catholicism or what have you, or something else, and suddenly they find themselves in jail for having the title Christian. But you actually are a Christian. So you don't really gravitate towards them, but you find out that there's this other guy there who is a Calvinist. Okay, would you gravitate towards whatever that might mean? Would you gravitate towards that guy as opposed to everyone else there?
Yeah, well, I think so. I mean, obviously, in a scenario like that, you have, you do have to recognize that this is my brother. We may disagree on things, but this is my brother. Now, does it mean that all of a sudden, we're in this situation and I become, we're brought to what really matters? Well, doctrine matters, and I don't all of a sudden forget what I know. And I think sometimes when we have this discussion, it could be seen maybe differently from people on the right and the left of us here. Partly, I feel like there's a distinction between matters of doctrine and matters of application. For instance, if
you're right.
If I get into that situation, I don't believe differently about the Bible and the God of the Bible when I don't say the Calvinism thing is no big deal to me anymore because we're imprisoned. Mm-hmm. Well, why would that be? Why would I think differently about doctrine then?
Well, I mean, go ahead. I think there's a different tack you're taking on it, but go ahead.
Okay, but the flip side of that would be for somebody to say, well, I don't own a television. You own a television. Well, that's a matter of a practice, of an application of something. And so, anyway, to me, yeah. So there is a difference. Like you say, it's sort of an extreme example, but would we both have a mindset of saying, me and a Calvinist, would we have the mindset that we want to glorify the Lord? We want to see other people brought to Him. We want to be a light. We want to manifest the character of Christ. Sure. I mean, yeah, right. And in that scenario, all of a sudden, the things that in application make us different, like, okay, somebody else goes to a church with the trap set on the thing. Well, we're not, we're not debating music at the time. It's not that I forget what I know. It's that that's not the issue at hand. And
right. But additionally, I think a lot of times separation happens for partly the right reasons, but maybe partly not right reasons. I think sometimes we're afraid to be seen with someone else, because we don't want our other separated brethren to think that we are in accord with that guy. And I think that's the part that will probably not matter so much in the circumstance of persecution. I don't think we're going to care what others are going to think about us because our life might be over soon. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Although, I mean, I'd have to say that there is some merit, I suppose, for not being too chummy with people in a free society.
Well, sure.
Who embody views and applications, and doctrines different than we do.
Yeah, but my point is that I think sometimes we separate for kind of an imbalanced reason like that. That becomes our only reason for separating, and it becomes more
because of what other people think.
Right, right. And I think maybe there is the presumption on, for instance, the commentator in question here, there is the presumption almost in his mind that is the reason why separatists separate. Because we just don't want to be seen with certain people. And that somehow that'll melt away in jail, right? Because your life's going to be over soon, so what does that matter?
Yeah. Which, I mean, it does, I do think, too, about the attitude. I think that, obviously there's something to believing something in such a way that you make certain decisions that are different than other people who believe. In other words, what I'm driving at is separation, but I'm saying it a different way. But it doesn't mean that we have to be nasty and caustic and divisive and look down our nose. And so, I mean, even right now in a free environment, when you see somebody else that, as we say, loves the Lord but sees things differently, we can still be kind, we can be gracious, we can be a loving person to that person. There doesn't have to be like this coldness necessarily.
Yeah.
And obviously there's a balance to all that and how we express that. But I mean, our love and our demeanor as Christians doesn't have to be, like you said earlier, rude, just because they believe differently. But even if I was in a prison setting, I guess the thought crosses my mind, not only would I be, in wanting to glorify the Lord, not only would I be wanting to share the gospel and see other people drawn to Him, I would want to be positively influencing other believers. And if that meant seeing Him more clearly and saying, wow, what a holy and a pure and a beautiful God He is, and He's deserving of everything. If we got into doctrinal conversations, that would be okay. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's not like I would say, well, let's not talk about that. Let's just see people won to Christ, because that's the whole. Let's get together just on the basis of the gospel thing. And why does it have to be that? Why does it all of a sudden when I'm in prison, I have to all the doctrinal things outside of the gospel have to be stripped away, and suddenly you're less of who you are. Well, I'm still the same guy. I still believe the same things.
Yeah, I don't really think that's in question at all.
Okay.
In the commentator's point. I really don't. I don't think that's the question.
Well, I kind of feel like it because he's saying if there are differences now, if they wouldn't be differences then, why do they have to be differences now? Well, there's a good reason why there's differences now. And so why do I have to? Is he talking about the way that we separate, or what's the focal point at that point, or I guess maybe I am a little lost on what he's driving at. It'd be good to have him explain.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think the way I took it was more to say that even though we do have doctrinal differences now, we would gravitate to someone like that in that circumstance because we know we don't have much time left, and they're the only person you have that's even remotely close to like-minded in jail, even if they're not entirely like-minded. That, in a sense, in your last days, you're going to seek out that kind of fellowship that you always had with Christians. You're going to seek that out even in jail, even if it's not the most ideal situation. Not that the issues that we separate over are not important. I'm agreeing with you that the issues that we have are important, and the matters that we separate over are important issues. And it's necessary to do that at times. But I think we're going to crave that kind of fellowship under persecution. In the absence of perfect like-minded fellowship, we're going to take whatever's next.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying. Although, honestly, and of course, in honesty, like you did, I think in an episode or two ago, I appreciated your fairness with the question to say, I don't know what I'd do in that scenario. What I mean is that if some of the guys now, the way they are handling the gospel, and it's, whether it's a touchy-feely, man-centered, grace abounding kind of thing where you go, I'm not for sure exactly that we're like really squared away on the gospel. If we got into a prison situation and there was some guy over here, there was this charismatic personality who was saying things that I didn't agree with. I don't know that I would, at a certain point, a guy might call himself a Christian, for that matter, there could be a priest, and he cares about, quote, things of God, and he's trying to give people peace and comfort. Okay.
Well, I think the qualifier is that they actually are a saved person. That would be the assumption, is that you found someone who is actually saved. They're just not on the same page.
So you think maybe the illustration was going at the fact that of having fellowship with somebody for my own sake, meaning not that we're on the same page as far as how we influence other prisoners, but that we could find enjoyment in each other's company.
Right. I think that's kind of where it's going.
Well, and I kind of think that you can do that now. Maybe that goes to an attitude thing. If you happen to run into a guy that's more of a contemporary guy and things are more modern with him and contemporary music and things like that, but he truly is a genuine believer, couldn't you have a decent conversation with him now?
Sure, but the way some Christians are today, that could get you canceled. I don't know if I've...
So you're saying maybe we had a cancel culture before the culture had a cancel culture?
I absolutely am saying that. I've been part of it. Let me explain.
Cancel culture.
Yeah, I don't know if I've told this story on the podcast before, and I will try to tell it sensitively as much as I can. But I knew of a young pastor who had taken a ministry that was kind of known in the community for being somewhat new evangelical. Though it was a Baptist church, it didn't quite check all the boxes that a lot of fundamental Baptists like. And so this new pastor comes in, and his goal is to kind of help this church grow in a right direction. The pastor was not a new evangelical. The church just had formerly had a pastor that was kind of that way a little bit.
And other people wouldn't necessarily know that. All they knew was the reputation of the church.
Right, all they knew is the reputation. So they see this incoming pastor, and they immediately make a judgment call on him. Well, he must be a new evangelical too.
Yeah. Huh.
But he wasn't. And this pastor happened to be a friend of mine, right? The guy was doing his best to help this church go in a more holy direction. The church didn't really always cooperate with that. But as soon as it was found out that this guy was a friend of mine, right? Now not only is that pastor viewed as an evangelical just for going to that church and taking it, now I'm viewed as a new evangelical for being friends with the guy. And I was actually scheduled to preach at a conference, and somebody called that church and told that pastor, if you have Tom Balsamo come and preach there, we're not bringing our church to the conference. And
Wow.
and I got a call from the preacher, and the preacher, the host pastor, was very amicable, very nice about it. He didn't want to tell me this at all, but he said, this is kind of half of our conference, right? If we lose this church, so we're going to have to politely decline having you come. So I literally got canceled through actual Baptist cancel culture for doing nothing wrong, for no compromise whatsoever.
Yeah.
All because someone jumped to a conclusion because I was friends with a guy who was at a church that had a reputation in the community and so forth.
Which if I could say it maybe not quite so sensitively, that was a cave, I feel like. And it had to protect, it was a decision made to protect. I mean, okay, so we're having a conference. Mm-hmm. What's the point of the conference? Well, we lose these people. We lose half of our conference. So what? What's the point of the conference? You know what I mean? To have people.
Well, again, I need to be careful here because I don't want to give any personal information.
Yeah, no, I don't. And I was going to say, I don't know who this church is, so I'm not making a jab at someone specific. Although I am saying I didn't agree with that decision.
Yeah, well, no, I would agree with
friend,
you
so.
if that was the only factor. But there were other factors involved where I think the pastor was kind of put into a tight spot, the host pastor, and I don't disagree with his decision to cancel me, because there were other factors involved that he really had to keep fellowship with this other guy.
Okay.
I'm saying too much. I'm sorry.
You're being gracious. That's good. Yeah. So
I'm trying. Yeah. But my point is this: I'm not angry with the host pastor. He did what he had to do.
There's a cancel culture.
Yeah.
You're saying he was put into that bind by someone who wasn't looking into the facts either, made a judgment call on you, and made the threat because of essentially a cancel culture mindset.
Well, yeah, absolutely, a cancel culture mindset. But I mean, the word that comes to mind is petulant. Is the way that they were behaving, and just to call a pastor and say, if you're having this guy come, I'm not coming. I mean, that's just petulant behavior. Especially if you have no evidence for making such a decision. All that to say, I agree with you. We could talk with some new evangelical who may actually be born again, but they're not on the same page. We can have a friendly conversation with them. But I think a lot of people are afraid to, for that exact reason that happened to me. Because there are people who do not give each other grace. There are people who do not give each other understanding. There are people who do jump to conclusions out there. And there is legitimately a fundamental Baptist cancel culture that exists. I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah. And to go back to that issue of a brother, I mean, how many people live in a family where you don't agree on everything with every family member? Well, like everybody, most, there's a large percentage of people, I would imagine, but do you still love them? Well, sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know what I mean? And you genuinely care for them when they're hurting. You care. You want to be an encouragement to them. You want to, if you had an opportunity to influence them with your beliefs, well, sure you would. But it doesn't say, well, if you don't believe this one thing like I do, then, I don't want to see you at Christmas, and I don't care about your family, and I don't care what your kids turn out like. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It's so. I mean that brotherhood mentality. We do need to watch that. Obviously there's two sides. I mean, one is you're a brother, love each other, for crying out loud. The other side is to say just because we're brothers doesn't mean we act like there are no differences, and we do everything the same. You have to be honest. But goodness.
Yeah.
So can I transition to this other question?
Sure, please.
I had
please get us out of this.
Like, if I keep talking about this, are you going to cancel me? Or are you going to cut me off?
We've already been canceled.
So my question is, what does it mean to be a peacemaker? And let me back up and ask, what does the word peace mean?
I would say it would have to do with the absence of conflict.
Okay. I think biblically that is sort of a derivative of it, that there's an absence of conflict, but the I think the biblical concept of a wholeness comes into play. That, when we apply peace, say, to a political or to a national level, and we say, oh, they're having no war. We apply, peace to someone's life or to someone's health, and we say they have no sickness, because there's no lack in their life in that area. They're whole, they're full, if you will. So that concept of making someone whole, or filling them in the parts where they're lacking, that's I think part of the idea, the foundational idea of peace. And so when we talk about a peacemaker, I think we could tend to think and say, well, a peacemaker is whoever, avoids conflict. And so if there's a fight, we go, oh, come on, guys, come on, let's not fight. And every disagreement, no, let's just find common ground. Let's be at peace. But what really is a peacemaker? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't know that I could really speak to the mannerisms of a peacemaker so much as the mindset of a peacemaker.
Okay.
I would say that
that's good.
A peacemaker is one that loves peace.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that, I wouldn't see a peacemaker as someone who is completely anti-conflict. Because I think there is a line in which someone can cross in which they're not a peacemaker anymore. They are a panderer. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I see.
And I saw it because I think there is necessary conflict in life sometimes. There are times where you do have to say something, and you do have to respond to something that will not always result in people liking you, that will not always have people be at peace with you. So I think the mindset of a peacemaker is one who loves peace. They'd prefer peace. They would rather have peace in any scenario. And they work towards that, because what you love, you're going to work towards, right?
Well, and that's where I think maybe there is a distinction. I think maybe there's some who love peace, and there's others who make peace. And you can love the environment of no conflict, but it's something else to work toward an environment of no conflict.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like maybe that's kind of splitting hairs a little bit, but that is what we do here.
Yeah. I mean, and you can enjoy the benefit of something and be comfortable without knowing how to truly achieve a good peace.
Yeah, that
anyway,
makes
so
sense.
go on with what you're saying.
No, that's so pretty much it. I think being a peacemaker precludes one having a mindset that loves peace. Because the thing that you love, you work towards. Otherwise, you don't really love it.
So when you're talking about peace and how you work towards peace, how do you do that? I mean, when you talk about, say, conflict resolution or things like that, but you're distinguishing it from pandering, what's the difference? I mean, how do you resolve conflict then? Do you just cave on everything and say, okay, that's fine, whatever, let's just not fight about it?
No,
whatever you want.
See, I can't see that being a peacemaker. Someone who just will never endure conflict. So in every sense, they're like, well, let's just not fight about it. Let's just not fight about it. Because there are times you find yourself in a situation where someone wants to make a fight over something, even when you don't. I mean, have you ever been drawn in like that? Where especially on the internet, this happens. People just they want to draw you into conflict, and then as soon as you don't respond, they're like, I thought so. You're just too scared to say anything. With that old chestnut. No, there are people who want to draw you into conflict, and for my part, I bow out of that typically, because if someone's trying to draw me into conflict, I don't want to really do that. But there's often times when you do have to say something. So are you asking me what is the difference between a peacemaker and a panderer? Is that generally your question?
That's one of them. That's
okay.
Yeah, part of the question. Yeah.
I would say that someone who is a panderer in a sense, disobeys their conscience when they know that they should speak up, even though it will invite conflict, and yet they don't.
Okay, and that's interesting, because what you're saying is that in their conscience they know something to be true, but they don't want to push that truth because it will create conflict.
Right.
And so my thought on peacemaking is that in order to be a peacemaker, you have to advance truth.
Right.
Because
good point.
Our pastor says it this way, typically in a salvation context, there is no peace without reconciliation. Well, reconciliation to what? And so I just think that, we say, well, so if somebody gets the idea, well, I just need to be a peacemaker, and there's just so many fights, even in Christianity, let's just stop fighting. Let's just, let's just be agreeable.
Stop the fighting, start uniting.
Yeah. Right. And I think that's part of, it seems like that goes hand in hand with the mentality. Let's just meet on where we all agree. Let's stop, all of our petty arguments, air quotes, as anything that we disagree about. We don't need to argue. Let's just get together on the gospel because we agree on the gospel. Well, even that's acknowledging that there's a truth of the gospel. But if we're going to be a peacemaker in the best sense of the term, it's going to be making people as whole as possible as it relates to truth. Right. In other words, I'm going to have to present who, in my study and my perception, God is and what truth is. Now, of course, in doing that, God would have me to have a right attitude about it. So there are some people who are inflammatory and nasty and
sure.
What do we call it? Condescending. But I'm saying it has to involve truth. And so to say, well, no, just set your truth aside so we can have peace. No, because that's not really a true peace.
Right. So to put this in the context of an actual scenario, let's say, a theoretical scenario, I should say. Let's say there's someone in your church who kind of has a deviant doctrine, something that is aberrant from truth, but they get along with everybody and they're not stirring up any trouble, but yet they're not headed in the direction of truth. Do you let things be because they're getting along with everyone and they contribute in some sense to the social and fellowship aspect of the church? There's a chance that they will probably learn and grow in the future. Hopefully, that's what you pray towards. But right now they have an errant doctrine. Do you address that to advance toward truth like you're saying? Or do you just say, well, let's just agree to not talk about it here? I mean, what's the difference?
Well, there's two different levels there. Whether I have to make it an issue with that person individually, is a question people may answer differently. But I would say, am I going to avoid it in preaching? No. If I feel like if that's where I'm at, that's what I need to preach, and that's what the people need to learn, that's what I'm going to put out there. Yeah. Now, do I have to go to that person and mention it every time we see each other and say, hey, you need to think about this. Hey, bud,
right.
Yeah, I think you're off on this. Then you're sort of maybe trying to at times rush sanctification or, put another burr into their saddle. But no, you don't avoid the doctrine. You don't avoid the truth and avoid the preaching of it.
Right.
So, yeah. So I just think that's an interesting point to be made, is that peace, true peace, requires truth and right. An interesting, I think, biblical example is Solomon and the devastation of an ill-gotten peace. David had peace God's way. David was a warrior. David was a righteous man. We know he had his mistakes, but obviously, but he was a man after God's own heart, and there was a time of peace. Mm-hmm. Well, then comes Solomon, and maybe this is an assumption, but he marries all these wives. Well, I think part of that was a diplomatic move. I marry the daughter, of the king of Egypt.
That's how it started.
Well, he's not gonna attack us. I'm married to his daughter. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
She's married into the kingdom. So it was maybe a play at peace.
Yeah.
And that turned out very badly. Now, did he have peace? Well, yeah, technically he had political peace for quite a while.
Sure.
Until everything blew apart, in the next generation. But it was an ill-gotten peace, and we can go about, air quotes, peace the wrong way, and that would be by just avoiding any conflict and just saying, hey, we're just not going to talk about it. We're just, hey guys, stop fighting. No, you want to drive towards truth and an understanding of truth so that we can both be reconciled, talk this out and see what truth truly is and be reconciled to that truth and then be at peace because we're both more whole, not because we both are on the same side, but because we're both on the right side.
So I have a question. I know of some families where not all of the adult children agree on things. And when they get together at family gatherings, the father, the patriarch of the family, and I know several families who have issues like this where the father has said, we're just not going to talk about that at family get-togethers. That's not going to be an issue here. We're not going to talk about it. And they've seen a degree of peace in their family because when they used to get together, they would argue about those things, and now they don't. It's not that they have changed their minds. They just have agreed we're not going to talk about that issue. Is it different in a family scenario like that? Because what you're saying is that, having peace doesn't mean, we're just not going to talk about that. Let's just not talk about it. Let's just not fight over it. In a sense, you're saying that may be like a fraudulent peace in a way, or at least some sort of pseudo peace.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But is the scenario different in a family where the people are related by blood together, but they've agreed we're not going to talk about this issue because to us our family gathering is more important? Same thing, different thing?
Well, again, I think there's how you apply it on different levels might be different. Like you said a minute ago, okay, let's say we're in a church situation and somebody doesn't believe exactly what I think is right for them to believe. Personally, to go to them and constantly make that an issue might be poor timing.
Sure.
There's something not only to saying truth, but timing it as well. But does that mean that as a preacher, it throttles me that I can't say that to the whole congregation because that one person will disagree with me? No, I still preach, and you still got to be, unbridled as far as the truth goes, but as far as on a personal level doing that. So in a similar way, in a family, at least right off the top of my head, I would have to say that I wouldn't want to be throttled as a father to say, well, you can't really make comments about God like that because not everybody agrees. No, I'm going to talk about God like I think, I'm going to talk about truth like I think it is. Now, do I have to bring it up intentionally to the point where we disagree and make an issue of it? Not necessarily, but it's not going to keep me from stating the truth as I see it. And honestly, you do have to wonder, and it's going to be drawn down to 1,000 different discussions.
Sure. Yeah.
And what truth we're talking about, and is it a matter of practice? Is it a matter of doctrine? Is it a matter of this? Is it a matter of theology? Is it a matter of this over here? But if we say, we have big differences in our family and we love each other, and so therefore we're not going to talk doctrine, I couldn't call that as deep a love as I would want to have. Because I'd say, you go on in your error, and that's fine. And it doesn't matter that my grandkids will end up, 30 miles from where I'm at, doctrinally, and then they'll lead their family in the other direction. But it's okay because we love each other. Well, that's not exactly okay because, if you truly love them, it means that you want the best for them, and the best for them is to know God and to understand truth like they should, even if at times it hurts. And so, the wounds of a friend are faithful. So I wouldn't just say that on every issue I could just make this blanket statement that we're not going to talk about things we don't agree about because I don't think that that's a godly move. Now, again, depending on the scenario, depending maybe on what it is and the personalities involved, and the timing. So maybe it's a timing thing. Like people are, some people are the kind of the aggressive debate type, and they're going to come to every family thing, and they're going to be like, yeah, let's talk about this, because they love the fray, and the other one's like, no, and they're not ready for it. But it doesn't mean that in time, on a personal level, father to individual child over the phone, we might not talk about this and plead with them for the truth. But are we going to make it a family squall every holiday? No, that may just not be a good setting.
Yeah. Okay.
A good question, though. I'm glad you asked that.
Sure. You're welcome.
Well, that I think kind of wraps it up, and we would welcome your feedback. It's reasontogetherpodcast@gmail.com. That's reasontogetherpodcast@gmail.com. And if you have a thought on this about peacemaking, about truth, about fellowship in prison, anyway. Give us your thoughts on that. If you disagree with us, if you don't communicate with us, we'll assume you canceled us, and so we'll cancel you back. And no, not really. We'll just start assuming everything about everybody, and then we'll anyway. I don't know what we'll do.
Yeah.
I know we won't do that. So Anyway, we welcome the feedback. Thanks so much for listening.
Yeah, we do appreciate you joining us again on this episode. We are encouraging balance, developing perspective, and connecting faith to practice. This is Reason Together.